into something greater for my... Do you understand that suffering teaches you beauty in places you never saw beauty before? This kid was homeless, living in a subway, but to him, his job was to play a trombone to make enough money to eat, but he called it melodious, beautiful love songs. Do you understand that suffering? A young man by the name of Walt was told to paint a picture of a flower. When he painted it, he was kicked out of his class because there were other kids who painted every nuance and shade coloration perfectly like the flower. When he painted his flowers, they had faces and they sang. When he drew pictures of rats, they wore shorts and talked. When he drew pictures of ducks, they wore sailor suits and said blah, 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 blah. His teacher kicked him out of his class and he was expelled from the school. When he told the same story to Coca-Cola and RCA, they gave him $30 million to build a magic kingdom in the middle of a swamp. MIC, see you in the unemployment line. KYY, because this is my world. Suffering teaches us things about God and about beauty we would have never seen. The question is, why do you let me suffer? The question God asks us is, what are you going to do with the beauty I am showing you? You never would have learned in the comfortable suburban lifestyle you want. It amazes me. I just recently got a place in a loft community, and it is a predominantly white community. And while I'm there, every now and then there's a kid who lives down the street from me, and he drives his little, it's not even his, it's his mom's SUV, and he just kicked to the side with his baseball cap on backward, music playing, boom, boom. And I'm listening to the music. What is he listening to? And he's listening to some African-American rapper make reference to how he had to struggle in the jungle and survive and sell dope and drugs just to make it, and how he had to duck and dodge bullets and guns. And my story, what is a white kid doing listening to that? I didn't understand it totally until one day I watched the movie Old School again. Y'all remember the story about Will Ferrell? And Will Ferrell was in Old School, and Will Ferrell said when he got up that morning and they said or the night, said, you want to drink? He says, no, I have a long day tomorrow, a very important day. And they said, what you going to do? He said, well, tomorrow I have to go down to Home Depot and pick out wallpaper. Sometimes our lives are so filled with wallpaper and boring, mundane things that it is only suffering that can break us out of the monotony of our life and force us to experience it. Why does a white kid listen to rap music about another kid who's really been through hell? Because he is so bored in his suburban life that instead of reaching out for Vivaldi or Miley Cyrus or the Jonas Brothers, he reaches out for someone else's pain, because pain shows you beauty nothing else can show you. If you put that kid in the hood, he'd move home real quick. But he knows that when you need to get life back, you reach for pain. You get it? Listen to me. What happens is that suffering gets rid of the box. And for the first time, you realize that you are capable of things you didn't know you were capable of. Have you ever been through something you thought you couldn't make it through and thought you didn't have it? Have you ever seen someone else go through something and you tell them, say, I couldn't go through what she went through, but then you went through it and realized that you had sold yourself short? Have you ever said, I can't take this another day, but here you are months later and you still taking it? You're not as weak as you thought you were. You're not as, you got power and strength that you didn't know you had. And the trial and the suffering and your pain and what you were going through were designed to show you that there were depths and dimensions to your life you never would have saw unless somebody walked out of it and said, you ain't gonna be nothing without me. But here you are, baby. You are something without them. I told you your life, your ministry, your call, your marriage was over. But here you are, only to testify it is not over. The reason God does things and won't let you move out of your neighborhood and won't let you get away is because he wants to prepare a table for you in the presence of your enemies. Why bless you with folks who said you ain't gonna be nothing, ain't gonna see it? See, some of you been trying to move, been trying to get away, trying to get out of town, trying to go East Coast, West Coast, and you're wondering, why am I still stuck here? Because the folks that said you ain't gonna be nothing, touch your neighbor and said, he prepares a table for me in the presence of my enemies. Ooh. Have you ever wondered why you can't get away from a situation? It's because God has predestined to bless you in that situation. What about the Polish guy whose father and mother and sister were killed? What happened to him? When his whole world was taken from him, a whole new world was open to him. He became Pope John Paul. Had his daddy still been alive, Poland would still be under Russian communism, and the world as we know it would be diametrically different. But because one kid took his loss and pain and used it to empower his dreams and visions. If you've never read Pope John Paul's poetry, you should just buy the poems he wrote and see the depths of revelation. Recently, the doctor, after having examined Mother Teresa's body, realized that Mother Teresa had suffered for the last 30 years of her life with one of the most painful diseases, so that if you touch something, immediately you turn black and blue, and it feels like somebody has hit you with a hammer. They didn't know that for the last 20 years of her life, she had suffered from that. Every time she gave someone a glass of water, it felt like she was dying. Yet she never stopped giving glasses of water. See, the story about the prodigal son that makes it so powerful is that it ends without an ending. The ending is that the elder brother never shows us how he responds. Do you understand that the elder brother is Jesus? When Jesus was telling the story, we were the younger brother and he was the elder brother. And the reason Jesus didn't tell the end of the story is because he hadn't lived it yet. Do you understand that he was hanging out with folks? He didn't know how he was going to respond. He didn't know how he was going to react. He left it open-ended because he had to see if he was really capable of loving us as much as he wanted to, because sometimes you know it here, but you don't know it here. And he had to realize, and through when he went through his suffering and when he was in the garden and he had the option of walking away from it, he said, nevertheless, not my will, but thy will be done. So that the writer of Hebrews could say, we have a high priest who could be touched by our infirmities. Why must God become man? Why could he not save us with one word? Because salvation does not only deal with sin, because there is still pain after you get saved. There are still problems after you get saved. Sometimes life gets harder after you get saved. Salvation in the mind of Jesus was not only forgiving us from what we did, because what we did was not only the problem, it's what we are going to do with what has happened to us. And so Jesus comes along and he becomes a high priest just like us. He goes through hell. Why does he go through it? He goes through it so that you and I could have someone who doesn't stand far off but stands next to us. Paul says, I want to know him in the power of his resurrection, in the fellowship of his suffering. Stop making friends with the same folks who drive the same cars, but make friends with folks that have been through the hell you've been through. Now, when the Father listens to our cry, we do not cry alone, but Jesus stands with us and lifts his voice in an agonizing cry to the Father, and we become empowered because he loved us. So now here is the proof of his love. The proof of his love is that he became like us so that he could relate to us. See, don't you let no one tell you they love you if they ain't willing to get down in the stuff you going through and be